Hi, Melissa and Jim.
Hey, Michelle.
Did you see my email about Beth Cole taking
I-
Chris's place?
I just did, yes.
Okay. Chris just called me like 20 minutes ago. He's stuck in another emergency meeting, so Beth's gonna fill in for him.
Okay.
Hi, John.
Hello, how are you?
Good. Yourself?
Looking a little rough. I was pruning bushes and trimming trees all day, so
You want a job in the Parks Department?
maybe in a couple weeks.
Good
I'm not a cold weather kind of guy.
to know. John, I don't know if you heard me telling Melissa, Chris is tied up in an emergency meeting. He called me about 20 minutes ago. So Beth Cole from his office is going to be filling in for him. I think she was at the November or the December meeting.
Okay.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Mike.
Hi, Mike.
How are you?
Good on yourself?
Good, thanks.
So do we have more people on this call, or is it just me and Mike, or Mike and me?
So far at the moment, it's just you and Mike. I am going to add that Eric Schock, the attorney, there's Scott Miller, the attorney for the Crown Plaza, is participating. So to save him having to hear the wireless communication facility ordinance, if you wouldn't mind potentially going out of order on the agenda.
Perfect.
I mean, Eric, you're welcome to stick around for that conversation, but I think you might find it somewhat boring.
Thanks. I'll check in with the results afterwards if you don't mind.
So,
We now have 4 of you, John. Rick just signed in and Scott's here as well.
great. Okay. And does it happen to be 3:30?
According to my laptop, yes, but you might want to give it another minute.
Yeah, let's wait a minute or two.
Eric Ostomchuk just signed in.
Oh, perfect. Okay, let's call the meeting to order of the Planning Commission on March 1st, 2021. Do we have, can I get a roll call, please, Melissa, just so I make sure who's here?
Sure. John Woodward,
Here.
Scott Miller,
Here.
Michael Herr,
Here.
Ronald Stanko, Rick Weinhofer,
Here.
Robert Keith, Eric Ostomchuk.
Here.
Okay. Do we have any public comment? Okay. Hearing none, we'll move along. So we're going to go out of order here and take the Crown Plaza zoning ordinance overlay. Now, we talked about this at the Economic Development Committee meeting, and we've seen it for a while. It's pretty straightforward. Do you want to make any comments on that, Michelle?
Sure, just to give the Planning Commission some background, Eric Schock, the attorney on behalf of the proposed buyer of the Crown Plaza property, is participating in this meeting, as are a few people from his team. The Crown Plaza is up for sale. The proposed buyer, Veteran Services USA, is proposing to redevelop the site, keeping the footprint an existing structure exactly as is, but breaking the building itself up into 3 uses. One use would be an adult daycare facility. One use would be 55 and older age restricted housing with a preference to veterans. And the third use would be a smaller footprint of the existing hotel. So the C2 zoning district where that property is located does not currently permit by right residential uses. So Eric and his team came to the January and actually the December, January, and February Economic Development Committee meetings. We talked through an overview of what the redeveloped site would look like. Taking that information, Jim McCarthy, Chris Hartman, and I had a few meetings to come up with the draft ordinance that is currently on your screen. Melissa, if you can scroll down to the second page. You'll see, items A through, oh, I just scrolled too far myself. Items A through K are all things that Jim, Chris, and I felt should be included as part of allowing the residential component and the adult daycare component to be permitted by right in the zoning district. We can quickly go through those new sections, which the combination of uses permitted on the parcel spells out specifically hotel use as we define it, an apartment use for 55 and over housing, and adult daycare. The apartment use shall require long-term residential occupancy, 1-year minimum lease. We wanted to make sure that, we're not creating in effect some type of boarding house or transient community. Put in provisions about the adult daycare use, defining it, so to speak. The combination of the 3 uses shall be located in the existing structure. So, some of this, we're not creating this overlay specific, I shouldn't say that. We are creating this overlay specific for the Crown Plaza, but at the same time, it could apply to other hotel properties in the borough that meet the minimum requirements as to parcel size, which is a little bit further down in terms of net acreage, and how the building itself would be laid out after redevelopment. At least 40% of the gross floor area of the former hotel shall continue to be used as a hotel. We put an off-street parking requirement specific for the hotel use, the apartment use, and the adult daycare use, which are similar to other residential and retail service establishment parking requirements in the borough. Again, net acre size for the proposed redevelopment parcel, signage requirements, allowing something a little less restrictive than what is in the underlying zoning district currently. Lighting and landscaping requirements, those would be subject to approval by Borough Council. Sidewalks and curbs must be brought up to current standards in our street and sidewalk ordinance, and paving shall be repaired and replaced where necessary as determined by the borough. So with that high overview, does anybody on the Planning Commission have any questions about the draft ordinance? And Jim, feel free to jump in if you want to add anything.
I have a question. The apartment use, how are they handling kitchen or dining or meal preparation?
So each
Uh,
unit, I'm
Oh,
sorry.
Go ahead, Michelle. I was going to say, I was just going to let you know, Michelle, Andy is on, so you're welcome to answer. But if you need Andy to fill in the blanks, Andy Golubitsky, Planning Commission, is the real estate development person for the proposed developer. And to the extent there are those questions, Andy would be glad to jump in as needed.
Hey, Andy, have at it.
All right. Thank you for taking the time to meet with us today. So regarding the kitchen, the food preparation, each unit will have its own kitchen, a full service kitchen inside the apartment.
Okay,
Full fixtures, typical standard fixtures, nothing out of the ordinary.
And then Andy, to essentially, it'll take, am I correct? It'll take 2 hotel rooms from the portion that's being redone to make 1 apartment unit roughly?
It's a mixed mix of both. You know, some will be studios, some will be one bedrooms. You know, we're still working through the market research. You know, as we get deeper into the design process, we'll, you know, finalize the unit mix. But yeah, it could be either 1-to-1 or 2-to-1, depending on the unit mix. So it'll be efficient apartments, but you know, it'll be heavily amenitized.
Something I'd like to add, because it was important to the Economic Development Committee, there will not be access to the hotel from the residential component or from the adult daycare component. Each use within the overall property will have its own separate exit and entrance without access to the other areas.
Yep.
And do you have a feel for how many slots that you will have for adult daycare?
How many people visiting on a daily basis? Yeah,
Right.
actually, so to add to that, actually, we have Merle Griff on the line, I believe, as well.
Yeah.
She's actually the founder and operator of Sarah Care, which is the operator that's going to be in that facility. I'm not sure if she's joined us yet, but
I'm here. I'm here.
Okay. So Merle, I could answer the question, or you can. How many users do you expect to have in this location?
55 to 60 people a day.
Yep.
Is what we usually.
Thank you.
have. You're welcome.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I'd also like to add, planning commission members, you're familiar with the master plan study the Borough Commission 2 years ago that Forward Planning and Design did for us. One of the things that was called out in that study was the need for, senior housing. I don't think any of us necessarily foresaw it potentially happening at this property. We saw it happening, more over in the area of Berkshire Heights based off the overlay we created for that portion of the borough specifically. But what Veteran Services USA is proposing falls neatly in line with something our consultant called out as being a need in Berks County in general.
And may I ask, the adult daycare clients, how do they get there?
If I can answer this, they get there by 2 ways. We have our own vans that have wheelchair lifts. So we're either using our own vans or we're subcontracting with senior transportation. And we have a few families that prefer to drive their family member there by themselves and pick them up. But they have 3 choices for transportation.
And this seems to work well at other locations that you oversee?
Yeah, we use it at all our locations.
Okay.
Yeah, it's especially the vans with the wheelchair lifts are very important. And not that people necessarily are in wheelchairs when they use them, but sometimes they're just a little unstable. And so we can bring them up in a chair onto the van, which makes it much easier for them.
So the daycare portion is on where is that, on the left portion of where the hotel is?
Oh my gosh, I should know this and I
Yeah,
don't.
I believe it was actually the lower right,
Yeah.
John. So that would be
Yeah.
the southeast portion.
Okay,
It's in front of what will remain the hotel portion.
gotcha. And are there any handicap issues getting people up there or not?
Our architects didn't see any issues, but Merle, did you have any thoughts there? I
No,
believe
we
you looked at-
haven't. No, we haven't seen any issues. And that's one of the things we look at very carefully. Because obviously everything for us has to be handicapped accessible.
Right? Okay.
Michelle, will this have to go through land development or is this strictly a code and building review process?
No,
for the
it will need to
conversion?
go through land development.
Okay,
So you will be seeing the plans for that in the hopefully near future.
okay.
Although we've had discussions about meeting with Michelle and Jim to kind of outline what it would be, because we aren't looking to do knock the building down or do an addition. So we will have plans, but they won't be as extensive, obviously, as if this were a raw land, right?
We have a full design team on board. We have a Pennsylvania-based architect who's has been the project for several months. They're actually visiting the site this week, as a matter of fact. But we will have much more detailed drawings, Eric, since our last conversation. So we should be in a pretty good place. Let me know whenever you're ready. I'll share those.
I mean, the one thing we'll be looking for as part of those plans is make sure that we have adequate circulation, internal landscaping, proper lighting, all those types of features.
Yep.
We don't want a giant asphalt sea at the end of the day like is there today.
Okay, noted.
I'm sure you'll also have to do a sewer capacity analysis. See the comparison of the existing use versus the proposed use.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And Andy, you have retained a civil engineer to start working on those, or at least reached out, and do you have them on board yet?
I believe so. I'll double check with Benga if we've signed a contract yet, but I believe we already have started. So traffic, we definitely have started, as we discussed before.
Yeah. They already have a traffic engineer although what the traffic engineer did indicate previously, and we referenced it at the Economic Development Committee meeting, is that actually from a trip generation standpoint, this probably reduces the number of trips overall, but there'll still be some traffic analysis that he'll have to do with respect to the access points and things.
Yep. And I imagine the sewage capacity should be very similar because we're not adding any units. If anything, we're reducing number of fixtures. So we don't foresee any issues, but we'll commission the report and nonetheless get a study together.
I have a question for Michelle or Jim. With these overlay ordinances, my main question is what other parcels this may pertain to. I see you have the 9-acre size requirement, but do we know of any other parcels in the borough that would meet this?
The Inn at Reading would be the predominant one. I looked at all of the hotel properties, and that's the main one that stands out that I would think would be interested in maybe using this to their benefit in the future.
Mm-hmm.
The rest of the hotel parcels, other than I didn't look at the new one on Berkshire Court just because that hotel's not even finished yet. So I highly doubt they want to redevelop it anytime soon. But all the rest of the hotel sites don't meet the minimum 9-acre parcel size.
Okay.
So interestingly enough, the Inn at Reading would now be eligible for 2 potential overlays. The one that we're poised to adopt at next week's council meeting, and then also this one.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Is there any sense in that case to adjust that acreage if you feel like there's other hotel chains that could benefit, or hotel properties that could benefit from just an adjustment to the acreage portion on this?
I would say hold off and see on that in the future. The residential component, I could see there being more of a need for, not necessarily the adult daycare facility use in that close of a proximity. I mean, the Days Inn, the Quality Inn are both within not even a quarter mile of this location. It's also one of those things, we tend to work with, in this case, Eric and Veteran Services USA kind of came to us and said, look, we're interested in this property. The current zoning doesn't work. Can we talk about doing something to make it work? So I think the borough in general would be open to that conversation with any other potential buyer of one of those other properties in the future, but we've not heard anything from them that there is any interest in redevelopment of those sites at this time. Thanks, Rick.
So does anybody else have any questions for either the developers or, Michelle or consulting engineer or our attorney? Are we ready to roll with this? We've been talking about it for a long time, not a long time, but a few months, let's say. And are we ready to roll with this or what? Anybody on the planning commission have any issues that they would like to bring up at this point?
No.
So is the course of action at this point to recommend to Borough Council that upon the Economic Development Committee's recommendation and the Planning Commission's recommendation, we recommend to Borough Council that they enact this ordinance?
Advertisement for adoption, yes.
Okay, great. So I presume we need a motion for that.
Correct.
Okay. Would somebody make that motion?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Perfect. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so be it.
Thanks a lot for your time.
Thank you so much. Thank you all. Really appreciate your help.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Signing off.
So now we go on to the communications Verizon situation, which I don't know how you want to handle this, Michelle, but it seems like from what we've seen initially, there are only very few red lines that have been modified. Is that a fair assessment?
That's a fair assessment, and all of the red lines you see from the last version we talked about at the February meeting were made because otherwise we would not be in compliance with FCC requirements. So, I mean, you'll notice on page 10, at the top of the page, it says within, where it used to say 90 days, we've changed it to 60
Correct.
days. And that last sentence was stricken, which had said if additional information was requested by the borough to complete an application, the time required by the applicant to provide that information shall not be counted towards the 90-day review period. That's not in compliance with FCC requirements. So Chris went through the version you looked at last month and made the red lines to comply with FCC requirements. Those were the only changes made, besides on towards the end. It's regarding the cubic square feet the unit can be. After talking with Verizon and some others in the wireless communication business, we realized that the cubic square foot we were suggesting, no equipment would actually fit within those limitations. So we, for obvious reasons, made the size requirement a little bit larger. And I apologize, I'm trying to find that. It's on page 19, Melissa, under subsection 10. And then subsection 11, we had changed it from 9.5 cubic feet to 28 cubic feet. So to go back to the conversation from last month, I know Chris gave a somewhat detailed background onto why this ordinance is being proposed. Just to give you a little refresher recap, I was approached by a representative of Verizon several months ago. Verizon had interest in installing the smaller wireless communication facilities on borough-owned facilities, both buildings and streetlights and utility poles throughout the borough. So before we move forward with that, I suggested we didn't currently have any aesthetic regulations in the wireless communication section of the ordinance. So I did some research on other communities throughout the country, what their aesthetic regulations are as to, everything from the distance these facilities have to be placed from one another, to some extent what they look like, advertising controls for signage. And, Chris and I had several meetings, to talk through my thoughts, his thoughts, put the draft together. At last month's meeting, my recollection is that Ron Stanko did bring up some concerns about radio frequency interference and the channels that emergency services use, and these facilities potentially interfering with that. Just as a reminder, those emergency service frequencies are on different frequencies than those that are available and issued licenses through the FCC. So there's no potential chance, as long as, your typical wireless communication facility is operating under their approved license, there should never be an interference amongst the two. That was the only major concern I recall from last month's conversation. Now that you've all had some more time to review this, does anybody have additional questions about the draft?
I do. I read it, I don't know, last week, and I read it this morning and whatever. But so when technology advances to the point where you just think about stuff and that's how you communicate, who is the last Mohican standing, the one that makes that structure go away, or what?
The owner of it. So there's a clause, there's already a clause in our existing zoning ordinance that says if you are the owner or operator of a wireless communication facility, whether we're talking tower based, so the large cell towers, or the smaller, non-tower based that are co-located on traffic signals or utility poles, if you stop using those facilities, you are required to remove them within a specific time frame from when you cease to use them. So, ultimately the person putting them up is the person responsible for taking them down.
Gotcha. And they would be it wouldn't be anything that doesn't exist before the whole wireless thing. So it's on traffic, traffic signals, it's on, telephone poles. So it's nothing that is freestanding that they would have to deal with.
Correct. Other than the case of a large tower, but again, in
Right.
that case, they would be taking the whole tower down.
Gotcha. Okay. Anybody else have anything? Okay, so I presume. Get this.
This also needs a motion to recommend to council for advertisement for adoption.
Right. And would someone make that motion?
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Okay, hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Motion carries. We'll recommend that to Borough Council. And is that the extent? Is there any miscellaneous stuff we need to talk about?
Just to update the Planning Commission that we will be having a meeting on April 5th, the regularly scheduled date for the Planning Commission. I just received 2 land development plan applications within the past week, both for the Wyomissing Area School District, one for the elementary school and the other for the high school, both for additions.
Really? And can you enlighten me as a taxpayer, not of the Borough of Wyomissing, but as the, taxpayer in the, for the school district? What do they want to do there?
Other than the very short and sweet, they want to put on additions. I can't give you more information at this time because I haven't even had a chance to crack the plans.
Right. Okay. So at the high school and the elementary school.
Correct. If you give me 1 second.
Trying to open the plan right now.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to do. So.
I will. Melissa, can I share the screen?
Sure, hold on a second. Give it a shot.
I don't know what you just did. It went crazy. Okay. Everyone see that drawing?
I do.
Okay, so it looks like they're putting a bunch of small additions on. So here's Woodland Road down at the bottom of the plan. You got a little addition going here on this section. A little one filling in this gap. We have a new playground addition with a little building addition there. Another little gap being filled in here. A bunch of little tiny additions around the school.
You know, back when I was on the school board in the early 2000s, we put a pretty big addition on there. And yeah, if we don't know it, it's probably none of our business at this point, but what are the additions for? Storage? There's no classrooms, right? Or do we?
I mean, I don't literally like Michelle. We just got the plans like 30 seconds before the meeting started, so I hadn't opened them yet either.
The addition for the high school, I'm looking at that plan set. It's, if you're familiar with where the administrative offices are, there's the driveway that goes, like if you're standing at the entrance to the administrative offices, there's the driveway that goes down the right side of the building and then comes out on Evans. It's a addition to the side portion, like back behind the administrative offices.
Right.
So it doesn't, that one doesn't look very large. It's one addition and it's not very large in size.
Okay.
No, I would think that's something, you know, you have every right to ask the school district representative that attends the April meeting as to, you know, what is the purpose or the need for the additions.
Right.
Even their application where it says purpose of addition, they wrote in school.
They checked what?
They checked the other box and wrote in school. Very helpful.
Okay. I'm not opposed to it, but as a taxpayer, I want to know what they need it for and whatever. I said I'd never go to a school board meeting after 2003, and I hope I can keep that promise. So, in any event, does anybody else have anything for the good of the order?
No.
Nope.
Okay. In that event, the meeting's adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
You.